Robots Radio presents...
Rated M for mature.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Download Weekly Gaming News, the show where we give you the DL on the latest in gaming every week in a small, bite-sized download. This week, however, we're not doing that because we are on holiday break. Yeah. So, as we will have announced last week in our episode, because we're recording this ahead of time, but it's actually going to air after, it's weird. We're not going to get into it. But anyway, you will know that this will be a kind of little bonus substitute for you guys about something we've been doing and are continuing to do on the side, but sharing. And then next week we'll have another little thing for you guys just to kind of, get you through the holidays while we enjoy some time off. And then so we're here and we're world building. It's time. So we have, and we've teased it. We've talked a little bit about kind of what we're starting this world building project, and so it's something that Brenna's kind of, I guess, quote, officially doing for the first time. As we've I
guess it is.
Yeah, because I'm sure you've probably done it in some aspect or another without thinking that you're doing it.
Well, I've done world building before, but it wasn't to do D&D. It was world building for sculptures and things like that I had done.
Fantastic. Yeah, so world building doesn't have to necessarily be for anything specific. It can be for anything. It could be for art. It could be for books. Can be for just short stories. It could be for tabletop games or for video games or for movies. It can be literally for anything. And that's one of the cool things. And it could just be something you just do for fun in your head when you're bored. I used to do that all the time. And then obviously I got into D&D, and I'm not a fan of playing the, already crafted stories and adventures. Sure, there are some cool ones out there, and I've played some cool ones, but I love creating my own space, my own world, its history and its story. So that's what we're going to do. And so the plan is, yes, the goal is to develop this for D&D, for a tabletop setting, or it could also be used for other things too. But we're going to kind of walk you through the process. Everyone's got a little bit of different process, but the kind of core elements are there. So, first things first is you got to start with an idea. And so, we've always talked about, and I think people have even asked questions like, we always talk about things like, oh, what would Mother Goose be if she was a Rainbow Six Siege character? Or, what would the Goose and Lion be if they were superheroes? I think was an AMA question we got once.
Yeah, so, actually, it definitely was.
Yeah. So we've always been thinking about like these things as like, what can the Goose and Lion be? And so that's what we decided our idea would be, is to world build around this concept of Goose and Lion, that these are characters within this world, but they are significant in some aspect. And so that's where we started. So we're kind of building a world for them. So you start with your idea, and your idea could be anything. Like one of my old D&D campaigns, Brenna's first D&D campaign she participated in was a world that I built. And the idea I started with was floating islands. And it kind of went out from there. And I called it my Ether campaign, Ether World, kind of this floating magical place. So your idea could be anything. It could be a person, it could be a place, it could be an item, it could be an event. But once you start with that idea, then you gotta expand on it. You gotta start to actually build the world out. And one of the things when you're building the world out, is you got to figure out scope. Because, you could look at like some I'm trying to think of a good example, but it doesn't have to be a whole huge place. Like look at some tabletop games. They have whole entire settings and it's just a house. It's one house. You never leave the house. But the whole, so the scope can vary greatly from, a world to a galaxy, to just a house or a city or a nation. Pokemon, it's just a one continent. And every game of Pokemon, they add a new continent, Kanto region and all sorts of stuff. So, it could be literally anything size wise. Brenna's given me kind of the glazed over look. This is going to end up being a lot of me talking because
Hey, ideas. I got things to say.
Well, so what we're doing right now is we're setting it up. And then once we've set it up, then we get to actually do world building. And then it's going to be a lot of talking. So we'll kind of explain our idea first a little bit before we talk about expanding on it. So the idea was, well, no, we'll get to that in a little bit. So you got to expand on it. And, depending on what you're going to do, expanding on it will be, either super complex or super simple. There's two kind of types. There's soft world building, and then there's hard world building. The easiest example of hard world building is something like Lord of the Rings. You know everything about that world almost, straight from the get-go. He's constantly giving you information and he's telling you everything you need to know. He's telling you the languages, he's telling you the people, he's telling you their history, their enemies, like, even swords that the characters are wielding have so much information behind them that he shares with you. So there is never a moment where you don't know the world and you don't know what an item or thing is in it. And then there's something like soft world building. And an example I think of that is, Studio Ghibli. Think about Spirited Away. And there's a great YouTube video on this that kind of really expands on this point. And they even use these two examples. But, he just presents you, like he just shows you these things. He doesn't tell you about them. He doesn't tell you where they came from, who they are, what they are. He is just constantly showing things. And he is only ever telling you what you need to know. And then the rest he's letting you fill in the gaps. And so that's more like soft world building. And so, the world building will cover everything depending on how complex you want to get. Religion, the people, the factions, the amount of money they make, the jobs they have, the armor they wear, like everything. What you got?
Nothing. I was gonna add in something there, Jameson.
I saw you.
Yeah, no, even obviously work schedules. Is it Monday through Friday? Is it, you have markets on Saturday or this or that type of a thing? What kind of market system do they have in that area?
That's actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was even something that I did in my Ether campaign.
Yeah.
Is I created days of the week. There is Mondays is market day. And that's like the day where all the shops people are out, the biggest, their streets are full. So that's like a significant day for characters. Like if they want to go and try and find things to buy or, interact with, everybody, because everybody's out and about. So it gets incredibly complex because you can do seasons, money, distance, time, days, months, it's all fair game.
I mean, you could be a part of like some crazy world where your day is, something like 200 hours.
That would be brutal.
Right?
That would be brutal. Like, would you be awake? Like if it like
what if you evolved to the point where
well, that's the question. It's like we live a 24-hour life because that's all we've ever, like a 24-hour cycle, because that's all we've ever known. But like, what if your world is 200 hours? What if you're awake
for like 100 and something hours?
yeah, like 150 hours or something, and then you just
So
sleep for
you go into
50.
a coma for like 50 hours?
Well, and then, that brings into the question, is the passage of time. Does that
Right.
100
Much
does
longer.
that 200 hours feel like actually 200 hours, or does for this, people, does it maybe feel like 20?
Yeah.
So all sorts of fun things you start getting into once you get into it. Um, and I find the best way is to have a notebook so you can just jot things down, because ideas will strike you all the time. And I even love having, the great thing about having a smartphone is, the notes app, like on my iPhone. Like the other day, I told Brenna I was working out at the gym. I was listening to some epic music while I was doing my workout, and then just all of a sudden, boom, idea entered my head because of the music. I was letting it roll, and I'm like, crap, I need to write this down.
Notes in the phone are great.
They really are, especially now since I learned you can lock the notes, so they Face ID to open them up,
Oh,
so
fancy.
people can't look at my notes.
I don't
So
know how
there's
much
some things.
people are getting a hold of your phone.
I mean, pretty much just you. So gotta keep you locked out of some shit.
Hey, man, the goose will never be locked out.
The goose is always loose. So, for me, the best place to start is by building the world physically. That once I know what the world looks like, I can start to really fill it. I can start picking out where places are, where factions are located, nations, and then you could really go into the nitty-gritty from there. Some people like to do it the other way. They like to, and you can, like I've done that before, where I had an idea for the ether, like a kind of Greek city-state style nation, and then I built a whole continent around that idea. So you can start small, but I generally like to start big and then fill it from there. Um, and so that's what we started first. Was we started with a map, and so we use a great map making software called Wonder Draft. There's another one that's really good out there called Incarnate, but Wonder Draft's amazing. I love it so much, like just the capabilities it has. So I spent some time messing around, like trying to draw one first, and I couldn't find. I didn't know what I wanted in a world yet, and so
Well,
I
especially
opted.
since that wasn't our first idea, your first idea wasn't something like floating lands. It was there is a planet, we are on it. There needs to be land, there needs to be water.
Yeah, our world is centered around these two characters. They don't even have names yet. We
No.
just call the characters Goose and Lion, and they are our respective characters, and they are like fantasy medieval versions of ourselves. Like that's how we're kind of building them. They obviously have some different. They all it's
I
yeah.
always
So
I tend to go a little bit more cynical and evil whenever I make my characters for some freaking reason.
God, and I tend to go very like hardcore and like
Oh, you go very
power and
typical.
greed and
Yeah.
I like, I tend to
Very
build to that kind of like monarch
yeah.
style, like, yeah. But that's part of the fun. That's part of the fun. I've created all sorts of things. So I spent like, I kid you not, I spent like an hour just auto generating maps before I found some land masses that I liked. And uh I think our world is about like 50, 45, or 55% water.
Yeah. And yeah, and that's one thing you got to think about is how much landmass that you want. So if you're auto generating and going through these things, start looking at the map and saying, where would I place my major stronghold, or where would I place major cities and things like that? Or maybe, hey, I really like this island. I like how close it is to this other one. Maybe that can be like a juncture or something like that. Just start thinking about
Yeah.
little things.
Well, one of the big things for me too is like I wanted there to be oceans. Like I wanted there to be like, a consider like the option for a considerable amount of sailing. But it's so turned out that like our world is almost completely traversable by foot if you really wanted to, like with the exception of these couple little islands in the middle. And again, we'll post all of our steps of how we, kind of fleshed out the world that we're talking about here on our website. Hopefully by the time this goes up, because there'll be some writing to do. But I mean, otherwise, like you look at it and like you can walk like,
Yeah.
almost all the way around if you go the northern route. But then it's also completely accessible by sea. Like you can reach everywhere via water and boat. So once we got a look for land and water that we really liked, then it's time to get like real serious. And so we opted for the scientific approach to building our world because in my experience too, and just because Brenna's a scientist, science when you build it based on like the science of the world, the geography, plate tectonics, air currents, all of that,
Pressure,
it,
temperature things.
it gives your world it grounds your world a lot more than if I just start placing mountains here and there and rivers willy-nilly. Because then some people will be like, that seems a little weird, like this jungle butts up right against these incredibly large mountain range, and on the other side's a frozen tundra, and you can totally do that.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that. But for this,
a really crazy world.
Yes. But for this, we opted to go for that more grounded approach. So Wonderdraft has this great feature where you can export your world as a height map. And if you don't know what a height map is the elevation, low points and high points. And so it exports it as black and white, which makes it very difficult to tell what are the highs and lows, because it's just black or white. But there's a online map making thing called Asgar's World Generation, I think is what it is. And so you can import the height map into that and then convert it into a colored version. And so from there, the colored version, it showed us where all of our peaks, mountain ranges were in oranges and reds in terms of density and height. And so from there, we were able to figure out where are the mountains in our world. And once you kind of see that, mountains also give you an idea of plate tectonics, because that's usually where plates tend to bunch up, or volcanoes are located, because nothing is random. And so once we had the mountains, then it only gets more complex, but also you figure more out.
Yeah, once you have mountains, you can kind of start arranging, I guess, high and low pressures. So that kind of dictates your temperature. So obviously in the mountains, it's going to be a little bit colder, and down by the sea, it depends on where you are. Like you can get cold drafts, and that depends on obviously, your winds and how are they matching up with your ocean currents, and are they hitting this side of these mountain ranges, so therefore it's swirling back. And so you'd probably see that the front side of these mountains and the front side of this part that connects into the water is going to be very cold, but maybe the backside is almost like a tropical humid. It kind of depends, obviously.
And again, you don't have to get this scientific about it. You can go very simplistic and be just like, oh, the middle band here of my Earth is the tropical zone. And then, this area is desert and this area is, temperate. But again, we wanted to get that more science.
What is the website that you used?
I had a bunch of links. I was Googling, because I wanted to do it right. And so I was Googling information about climates and, how you determine all that. And so there were some great YouTube videos, but I'll share the links too when we post this. But I found two great ones. One was working out climates using the Climate Cookbook. And then the other one was Weather and World Building 101. Another one was Climate Modeling 101. And so again, they're all based on real science that determines how the climates work in our world.
And I was gonna
Yeah.
say, we're not so smart that we just figured this out. It's literally step by step that it's like, all right, this is step one that you need to figure out. And then from there, you can determine your pressures. From there, you can determine this. And then it keeps going and building. And so it's not that we were just like, I know all these things and we actually had help with these websites.
Yeah, and this is actually something I hadn't done before because in the uh previous worlds I built, especially like the Ether world, like I just decided, different things. But like that was based on that had a different history behind it. So I kind of already knew, you know, what these worlds were like what the temperatures and climates were because of its history, which I had brainstormed. So this one, because we were building a full world from the ground up, we wanted to take that approach. And so, I'm not going to lie, we cut some corners because it is incredibly complex because it changes by season, there's all sorts of events that affect the air pressures and then the sea, there's so much that goes into it. It's so complex. But so we started by defining our ocean currents. And so we know that currents tend to move above the equator. They tend to move clockwise. So they're pulling warm water up along the west. Along the west, north. And then they're pulling cold water down along the east. And they go in these kind of clockwise fashions. Those are obviously the major currents. There's always smaller currents that break off of that going different ways. And then it's just the opposite for below the equator. It's warm water is being pulled down along the east side. Cold water is being pulled up along the west side. So it's just kind of flipped. And so from there, you can kind of figure out like your wind patterns usually follow something similar to that. And then, rain will, it even explains how rain hits. Rain tends to hit the west side more than the east. It won't usually pass mountain ranges. So like if you look at the US, like, rain will usually tend not to pass the Rockies. And then that's why it's just dead or dry between, even though that's a huge portion of our farmland, then they still get rain. The rain just doesn't cross the Rockies. It's, so it's things like that. And you can even see like in the world, like you can go to, view volcanoes in Hawaii. One side of the volcano, incredibly lush jungle. The other side of the volcano, it's just, island. So there's all sorts of real world examples you can pull from. And so from all of that, based on all of the figuring out the rainfalls, the winds, the currents and everything, then we could be like, okay, this area is our tropical equator zone. There's heavy rainfall here. Then we started, figuring out Mediterranean areas, desert areas, temperate zones.
If you're going to have sheets of ice, if it's going to be super cold at your pole.
Yeah, tundras and alpine areas. And, there will always be like little pockets of things, within these, but you have to like, some of our temperate zones might have alpine areas within them. That's normal. Look at Europe. But there are just flat, straight areas like Siberia that are just tundra. That's what it is. So we have all the broad strokes down. And then once we had all that down, we could be like, all right, now we know we've got all of our mountains. We know the kind of general weather and foliage, greenery of the different areas. Now we can really start to build because we know where things are. So we can decide like, oh, these people need to live in a desert. Like, let's look at all the deserts.
Well, that brings us back to who or what is in your world.
Yes. And so now we can start talking about the goose and the lion. So Brenna, since I've been doing a whole heap of talking, tell us a little bit about the goose.
Okay, so I guess in our world we decided that there was going to be magic, but there's not as much magic as in some areas or some worlds. Like I don't even know. it's not as widespread and it used to be. We're just kind of riding this line between, humans and magic and obviously other
It,
types of
and that will
creatures and
relate
things
to
like
like the
that. So
history of the world, which we haven't fleshed out. We've just we're just, these are broad strokes that we're using to build from.
yeah. And the goose right now is an elf. So elf, goose, queen type situation. And it is everything that you would think of, not a forest elf, but more of like a
High elf.
moon elf. So everything, yeah, everything is very silver and blue and lavender, very lightly colored. And the place that we are is kind of nestled in between, completely actually surrounded by mountain ranges, right in the
Huge
middle
valley.
of this
Yeah.
massive. It is. I like the area. It's very secluded. So everyone is supposed to be like this higher society, very snooty type of everything, just as you would think of for an elf, with lots of education. And I guess my warriors
Got some
all
slavery in there too. Don't forget about that.
we do. We definitely do. I was gonna get to that. We do kind of abuse, but also there's a good give and take with Kenku, which are like little tinkerers. And so they kind of on the sly do a lot of my, R&D and technology and military type stuff. But my nation obviously favors geese, and that's kind of like our not I guess kind of god-ish type thing we hold very highly. It's almost like a
It's like
what's the word?
it's more like yeah, it's kind of like a little bit of a spiritual thing, like a familiar. Like the geese is like the goose is like the emblem for your people, and we're still kind of fleshing that out a bit. We were talking about some of it last night with some our backstory with lore and weapons and things. So, but yeah, she's all about the birds, the Aaron Cockra, the Kenku.
Well, Aarakocra will be the few that are in the world because that's one of our things. We don't. Some races are very plentiful, some are not, and so the Aarakocra are my generals. So the higher up, and then obviously there's lots of magic. So people that have been done something in the society or are of importance can get some sort of feature, possibly. So transform some sort of magic applied to them to say that this is a badge of honor. I have goose feathers here, or something. I have talons now. I am a person of status because I look more like a goose.
Yeah, and it's also worth mentioning too that we're using because we are primarily building for D&D, we are using that as the basis of
Right.
like potential races that can exist. But we went through that and we decided, which ones do belong here and which ones don't, because some D&D races and sub races are very specific to certain elements,
Yeah.
and some we just don't see fitting in.
Like I don't think you have any Warforged in there.
No Warforged, no Warforged.
And
But
eventually, hopefully, this can be made into something that you guys can play and use as your own sort of world for D&D. And it's a grand idea, and it's going to take us a while, but obviously we want to come up with missions and playthroughs and things that you guys can do. So to be follow the goose and figure out their backstory, or figure out this, or follow the lion and why is the lion the way that they are. So
yeah. So again, it's all kind of very rough, and it is something we're always changing. We're always talking about. So, one day, we might, the goose queen might actually be a goose, and then the next day she, is an elf. It's kind of, things are shifting. So my character, the lion, is the king emperor. I haven't quite figured it out, but basically he is the leader of one of the largest human nations, and for whatever reason we haven't determined yet, he's very anti-magic. Magic is very strictly controlled, and they're tolerant of other races, but they're not at the same time. They're very pro pro-humans. And one of the ideas we've been toying around with is that maybe, in the past, humans were like these slaves to all the other races because they didn't possess magic. And then one day humanity revolted and learned how to use magic. And then they've kind of been fighting ever since for their place in the world. And maybe this is just one extreme of that, this nation. So we're playing with that idea. So, the lion will be the king of this, anti-magic nation. And is somehow in the past, like they've secured like the loyalty of the Tabaxi, which are the cat people, and the Leonin, which are the lion people. So like, the Lion Guard is the most elite soldiers that protect the king that are just made up entirely of Leonin. I got little ideas like that. Another tidbit to being the Goose and the Lion is that Brenna's character has a like massive goose that she uses as a mount.
Yes.
Like huge.
Terrifyingly, like dragon-sized goose.
Maybe more like griffin-sized.
Okay, fine.
But it's big. It's a big goose.
It could be a small dragon.
Okay. And then, I almost said my Lion King. I'm going to do that so much.
I really will.
My lion character also has like a very large lion that he has as a mount and rides in combat, but it's like an actual lion. It's not like Leonin or something. And that's like
stupid ideas of like, if this was before I think we had even created the world, we were just we always play around with the goose and lion, and it was like, what's some art that we would have, and
yes.
It turned into like how we would go in battle, because I thought of like an art scene where like my goose is like hissing at someone and I'm in the background, and then it devolved into I would launch Jameson into battle because I would be holding the lion in my goose's claws, and I would drop you into the middle of battle. So we got really ridiculous one night.
Yeah, that's you're right. That's actually where we decided let's world build, and we'll use Goose and Lion. Yeah, good memory you got.
Really?
Yeah, so that's kind of where we're starting at. So we wanted to keep this short, just because we can literally talk forever. So you can expect more of these, and they'll probably just be mostly us rambling and talking and just doing maybe some live world building. But for right now, we just kind of wanted to give you the broad strokes, a little bit brief about our characters, and about how we made the world, and this will pair with the post we're going to put on the website. And so I think the next step is for us to figure out the world's history up to our current point, and our characters' history and our nation's history. And then, because once we have like the world, once we know how the world got to the way it is, then we can start being like, okay, this is how our nations got to be here and all that jazz. And then from there, we can just get super nitpicky and start diving into all the minutia, like, how is the Goose Queen's army organized? Like, what kinds of soldiers does she have? What kind of weapons do they wield? What kind of armor do they wear? It's everything.
Oh, it's so detailed at this point. And it's okay. So this is also the pitfall. It is so easy to go down this rabbit hole of this is made of this, and it has this filigree with this type of leather that's on here. And then all of a sudden you spent all this time, and first of all, it doesn't fit in your damn world. And second of all, it's just way too much. Like at this point, It's way too much fluff. So you kind of have to stay grounded, and you got to save some of that and let yourself indulge in the details, but save a lot of it until you've got your whole world ready.
And that's why I like to start with the broad strokes and then work down, because if you start with the details, you get so bogged down into them And then it doesn't leave things for people. And especially if you're going to make it for D&D, we want to, when we build the world, we want to say like the Goose Kingdom is known for making they're elven smiths. They make a special kind of steel called featherlight steel or something. We were been talking about this. That's got this like white translucence when you hold it up to the light, and it's incredibly light and strong. And that's maybe one of their major exports. Another major export is ships. They're excellent shipbuilders after centuries of studying how geese float on water.
But in all reality, it's my Kenku slaves. I'm just kidding. Kind of. Am I?
But so see, there's things like that. And so you want to be able to give, that level of detail, but you can give that level of detail, but it still leaves room for things to be added for the player or for the DM or the reader to add detail.
I think the part that I think ties it all together, and which is great that obviously Jamie has been doing this for so long that it just kind of flows in. The little tidbit at the very end that he talked about, most of you probably didn't even notice. He said, yes, it's this beautiful smithing. That's what I'm known for. It's an export. So it lies into the story. It makes it seem like a world with trade. So that's one other thing is it's like it's the world. It's a detail. It's some fun, crazy thing, but it's also like, hey, this is an actual real world possibility.
And that's something that we'll get to later when we get into like specific nation building. Is when you're building a nation, you have to think about that. What is my major exports? What does my world lack that we have to import? Who are our neighbors that we trade with? Who are our neighbors that we are at war with? Who do we have peace with? Like, you have to think about all these little things, like what's the breakdown of our population? Are we very heavy peasants? Do we mostly live in cities? Are we mostly a farmer or nomadic culture? Like, there's so much. And so you have to try and break it into these bite-sized chunks and narrow it down from there. And so that's why I like to start the big. And so then you get a backstory, use that backstory to determine, who's in your world, where they are. And then from there, you just keep narrowing down that funnel. So that will be next. We'll do some backstory and we will start some nation building. So that's going to do it for this little episode. Again, this is, different from our normal stuff. So, but, we always thank you guys for listening. We hope that you're having a happy and safe holiday with, everything that's going on, no matter what holiday you observe or if none. Yes.
And if you guys do end up liking this video or this style, please tell us in our Discord or tell us on our Instagram, those type of things. Just let us know. Yeah, we really like this. Keep doing it. Or, I wish that you guys would do this or focus on, can you give me some ideas for a space themed one? Can you give me some ideas for, I don't know, some feudal Japan one? Whatever you guys want. We'll brainstorm and come up with ideas.
And there's a high likelihood that I've probably thought of something based on this because I do this a lot just in my head, just casually because it's fun. And it fills time.
So much fun. I don't care what anyone says. You can call me a damn nerd. But if you start thinking about your favorite world, how would you want to live? Everyone has fun.
I can't even help it. I'm a very it frustrates me so much how much of a creative person I am.
Don't have
I have no skills to make it physical. I've only recently in the last couple years had a lot of success with making physical world building, like being able to build these maps and show these things, make emblems for nations, but I still can't I love to be able to draw, be like, this is what this person looks like. This is what this nation's soldier looks like, or what the lion looks like, so I want to do that, but I'm just generally a creative person. I listen to a song and just all of a sudden I have no control over it.
And rolls and action films roll through your head.
Yes. I was listening to one song and it was a super epic and dark song. And then just all of a sudden my brain just started imagining these, 3 crusaders, creeping through this dark castle. And then all of a sudden when the music crescendoed, this, vampire villain or something appears and he just starts just cutting down these crusaders left and right, and he's not even, a second thought or a sweat. And then maybe there's one crusader that's able to stand up as the music kind of like becomes more hopeful, and I just do that.
Yeah.
And I can't not stop. So that's one great thing that's been about D&D is it's given me an outlet to create things, and then I get to just let people play around with it. Obviously, I'd love to be able to write and draw and jazz, but yeah. So as Brenna said, Brenna's on top of it tonight for not doing much talking. She's like on all the points. Talk to us about it. We have a new chat room in our Discord server, D&D Tabletop Chat. We'll be talking about it all there. You can leave comments on our website, on the post, social media, Twitter, Instagram. Chat with us on there. Everything is...
Tag us in something. Like, this is super cool. Can you guys talk about this?
Yeah, if you see some cool images out there, like Pinterest. Pinterest is such a great place to find.
God, time suck, devil, spawn of everything, most magical, amazing place.
I gave Brenna the wrap it up sign, but I know I've been contributing to it. So yeah, just chat with us. Share some of your ideas if you have things for, the world. We will work to incorporate it, especially with our Patreons. We appreciate you guys supporting. We've got a special plan for you guys to allow you to contribute to this world. And yeah, the ultimate goal is to create like a source book for D&D that this is the world, these are maps, this is, all the information about it. Here's some potential quests, how you could build a campaign. My last thing, if anyone of our listeners are good at any sort of art, like digital graphic design, please do. Let us. We're talking like Magic the Gathering, like style art. Just please let us know, and we will graciously work with you. For real. We'll compensate. We need someone. So with that, we'll wrap it all up. The normal places you can find us. Best place, obviously, is our website, www.dlgamingnews.com. Literally every link is on that website. Everything about us. And our little roadmap of what we've been doing. Yep. And we'll keep posting stuff on there and YouTube. And that's going to do it. Good luck. Have fun, everybody. And remember, keep your goose loose.
Hey, I'm Tom.
And I'm Stuart.
And we're from the Dungeons & Dragons Lorecast.
We talk about all things connected to D&D lore.
And we're on the Robots Radio Network. So if you're into Dungeons & Dragons or you're into lore, then come check us out. You can find us on any podcatcher, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, wherever you get podcasts.
Roll more dice.
That's the Dungeons & Dragons Lorecast.
Do you like adventure?
Yeah.
Do you like laughing?
Yeah.
Would you like to listen to a group of people you don't know play D&D and reference retro pop culture you vaguely remember? Excellent. You're going to love Committee Quest. We play D&D in the world of Amarin. We use adventure modules and supplements made by people in the community. We also have a sweet synthwave backing track. Come and join us on our adventure. Volume 1 has been completed. Volume 2 coming the end of January. You can find us on iTunes, Podbean, or wherever you get your podcasts from.